Okay, let's see. Oh, that one cut nicely. That's good. Okay, add that to the rest. Good. All right. Now I gotta get some more made. All right, next step here. Now I've got to press this. There we go. Let's take a look. Let's see how that turned out. Oh, good. That button's gonna be good. Just add that to the rest of the pile over there. All right. Got some more to make here. Getting a lot.
Oh, hey, Al. What you doing?
Oh, well, hey there, Pastor Steve.
Thought I heard somebody in here. What's going on?
Oh, well, I'm making buttons, like little buttons that you could wear like on your shirt or your jacket or something like that. They have this design on it with the dove on it. We're making them at the church, to help with the people who were living with the war in Ukraine.
You're making something to help the people of Ukraine? Well, how? That's really cool. I was just reading the latest news here on my phone about what's going on there. Pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, it sure is scary stuff. Hard to imagine what it would be like if we were over there and might have to pack up, a handful of belongings in a backpack and leave to go find a safe place to live for a while there was a war happening. It seems awful scary to me. I can't imagine what it would be like to have to live through something like that right now. Kids and adults, whole families. Yeah, kind of scary.
Yeah, you sure are right, Al. I tell you what, can I ask you something? I need to get your opinion on something. I read news stories, what people say about what's happening in the Ukraine. I hear it on the news, and sometimes I don't know what to think because I can't see it happen. It's like half a world away, and sometimes it seems like I hear people saying on news stories or saying that that the people in Ukraine must have done something wrong, or when things like that happen, when there's a war or where there's a disaster, that somebody must have done something wrong to make it happen to them. I don't know what I think about that, Al. Can you help me out?
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry this is distressing for you, Pastor Steve, especially when you hear things like that. It really is frustrating, isn't it? And you know what? I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not surprised. Sometimes I hear the same kind of things. When something bad happens in the world, man, is it really tempting for some people to say, well, they must have done it, made it happen. They must have brought it on themselves, or maybe it's God punishing them for doing something wrong. And it just makes me so mad. I gotta tell you, Pastor Steve, because that is not how it works.
Boy, Al, you sure seem awful sure of yourself with that. It's really hard to understand why, when terrible things happen, is it because God made it happen, or is it because God punishing somebody? It's easy to think that, right? I mean, help me understand, Al, because I don't know what voices to trust, to listen to out there in the wider world. And here you seem really sure, really certain that when a bad thing happens, like a war somewhere else, that's not God punishing somebody. So help me understand.
Well, I'm sorry to be losing my temper here, Pastor Steve, but this really gets my goat. I try real hard to be patient and listen to other people and be kind and respectful, but sometimes when people think they know what God's doing, or when they claim to speak for God, especially if they say that God sent some bad thing to zap somebody because they're like a worse sinner or something like that, that upsets me because it's so clearly not what Jesus says. And I know what you're going to say, Pastor Steve. You're right, there's no Bible stories where Jesus talks about this particular event in the year 2022, but Jesus had to deal with similar questions when he was walking around and teaching people. He had to say the same thing to people back then.
Really? Jesus had to address questions like this? Two people were wondering about like bad things that happened like in Jesus' day, like 2,000 years ago, and people thought that God was punishing people for when bad things happen then too?
Oh yeah, Pastor Steve. I mean, let's be at least fair that from the beginning of time, really, people have been asking questions about why bad things happen, and it's real easy to assume once we realize that God, made everything to go, well, when something bad happens, it must be God sending a punishment. I mean, it's easy to think that. It's wrong, but it's easy to think that. So yeah, people would come up to Jesus and they'd tell him about bad stuff that had happened, like if there was an accident and like a building fell down, or like if there was a mean king who bullied people or hurt people, and they sort of ask him like, well, Jesus, when these bad things happen, is that a sign that God must have been punishing the people who got hurt or the people who were involved in the accident or whatever bad things were happening?
Okay, Al. So bad things would happen back in Jesus' time, and what did he say to them when people would ask him when they thought that maybe if an accident or a disaster happened, that it must have been a sign that God was punishing people for being especially bad or something? What did Jesus say?
Well, sure, people ask Jesus questions like that, and when they asked him questions and they'd say, hey, this bad thing happened, Jesus, was that God punishing somebody? Jesus' response was real loud and clear, yeah, you just hold your horses for a minute. No, that is not how things work. Jesus was real clear to say, when bad things happen, don't you go assuming that because a bad thing happened to somebody else, that must be God zapping them. That's not how God does things. In fact, Jesus went out of his way to say, don't you worry about other people or start thinking other people are getting zapped by God. How about you worry about yourself right now?
What do you mean, Al? Like, worry about ourselves?
What Jesus meant was like, look, when something bad happens to somebody else, instead of going, oh man, I must be fine with God because nothing bad happened to me, but they must have done something terrible. Jesus says, how about this? How about you take care of yourself? You worry about your own situation. And if there's things in your own life that maybe aren't what God wants us to do, if there's things we should be doing that we're not doing, how about we focus on getting our own act together instead of trying to figure out if somebody else hurting is God zapping them? That's not how it works. Instead, Jesus says, how about you mind your own business? How about you worry about yourself instead of looking for God punishing somebody else? Because that's not how it works.
Okay, so Al, I'm hearing real clear from you that you're convinced Jesus is telling us when bad things happen to somewhere else in the world, a disaster, a war, an accident, things like that, that we shouldn't go assuming that, the God must be punishing them. That's not how God operates. But instead, maybe I should take a look and ask, what could I be doing that God wants me to do in this situation? How can I be help? How can I use this moment right now instead of worrying about somebody else? I should maybe look at myself. What can I be doing that would be good, that would be pleasing to God right now?
Yeah, exactly, Pastor Steve. We get into a lot of trouble when we start acting or thinking like we know how God works or that we know what God's up to all the time. We got to remember that God is God and we are not. So the moment I start thinking, something bad happened to so-and-so, God must be mad at them, I got to remember that's not how it works. Instead, it's an awful lot better use of our time to be thinking, okay, when things are happening in the world, what can we do that would be God's will? How could we be helpful to be a part of what God's up to in the world instead of trying to imagine that God's zapping other people? That seems awful mean. That doesn't seem like it fits like what I know of God. God sure seems always to be looking to help and heal and put right what's broken in the world. So maybe we could use our time thinking, how could I be a part of God's work to help make things right in the world instead of worrying or guessing about what bad things are happening to somebody else? What's going on there?
Well, what do you mean? What could we be doing to be helpful in a situation when something bad happens to somebody else?
Well, all right. Let's think of something we all just lived through, right? It's been 2 years now since we all had to learn about living with the pandemic and COVID-19, right? I mean, that was a rough time for all of us to have to live through these last 2 years, and I know there's still people dealing with it and people who are still feeling the effects of it and all that, but you remember when it first happened, when schools all got closed and all of our lives got changed a couple of years ago. There were some people who thought, well, this must be God punishing people. We should find out who God is mad at. It must be their fault. That's not how we responded, right?
Right, Al. We tried really hard not to waste our time looking for someone to blame or to say God must be punishing somebody. You're right. We didn't do that.
Yeah, you know, at our church, we were all, well, how can we help each other? Do we need to wear masks? Okay, we'll wear masks. Do we have to keep distance with one another? Do we have to make sure if anybody needs something brought to their house because they can't go out? Let's do that. What are ways we can help each other through this? How can we be helpful rather than wasting all of our time guessing, oh, a bad thing happened. Who is God mad at? Who made this bad thing happen that God is punishing them? We were listening to Jesus, who says that's not how God works. That's not how things work in the world. Instead, our job was to use the situation and the time that we had to find out how could we be helpful to show God's love to other people, even in that circumstance, even when bad things were happening.
You know, that does make sense. I remember when the pandemic first started, you're right, it was just like 2 years ago, and schools got closed down. We didn't even meet in person for church for a long time, and a lot of things changed for a while. And yeah, I can remember a lot of people just asking the big questions like, why did this happen, or who should we be mad at? And you're right, pretty quickly we realized that wasn't helpful. God didn't want us to go looking for who we could be mad at. But instead, what could we do to be helpful? So you're right, yeah, that's why we started wearing masks, or we even made masks to give out to people who needed them, or we changed how we did our work, or we changed how we got together for church. We did all kinds of video things too, all because when a bad thing happened, instead of wasting our time blaming or looking for who God must be mad at, we said, how could we use this time right now to do something good to help the situation? Even if it was little, how could we at least try to do something that was helpful to show God's love, rather than to waste our time looking for somebody to be mad at or to look down on, thinking that God was mad at them when the bad thing happened? That's helpful. Okay, I remember that.
Right. So I kind of think about what I'm doing right now the same way, honestly, Pastor Steve.
What you're doing right now, making these pins, is trying to do the same thing in this situation? Help me understand, Al.
Well, I figure I'm just trying to do something that could be helpful. That's why we're working together at the church, making these pins and giving them to anybody who wants to, and any money that they donate, we're going to send to Lutheran World Relief so that they can help people who are in trouble in Ukraine. It maybe feels like it's a small gesture, but we're trying to use our time and energy to do something good rather than nothing, or just watching on the news going, oh, what a shame that they're hurting. We've got this day, this time. I've got my talent, my energy, my ability to do something. Sure seems like it'd be a waste of my time or waste of my day to just go on with my life or pretend like other people weren't hurting. Seems like it'd be exactly what God wants me to do, to use my time and my ability to help make things right in other parts of the world, even if my impact is just a little one.
Okay, when something rotten happens in the world, like a disaster or a pandemic or a war, and instead of just ignoring it, or instead of saying, well, God must be punishing them, that's why that bad thing happens there, you're saying God wants us to use whatever time or opportunity or ability we have to do something good to help make things better. Is that it?
Yeah, Pastor Steve. I mean, really, that's kind of in line with what Jesus says too, right? When people asked him about if he thought bad things happening where God punished people, instead he told them a story and said, well, could you imagine that there was a tree that had a problem? Like there was a fig tree and it wasn't making any fruit. And you might think, oh, well, just tear it down, ignore it, who cares? But Jesus says, no, what if instead, the gardener took time, to prune it and take care of it and put fertilizer on it and water it, all that, maybe it could make a difference and help make things better. In other words, instead of when a bad thing happens, just saying, that's it, that must be God zapping it. Instead, to ask, how could we be a part of God mending it? God healing, God fixing, God putting things right again. That seems like something that's worth our time. And what we got today, I got the whole rest of the day free. How about you?
Yeah, today's my day off. I'm free. What for? Oh, you mean like if we spend our time, like our free time, making buttons and then using the money from this to help people in Ukraine, we could be using what we have, our time and our ability to help make something better somewhere else. That it's how do we use today? How do we use right now to do good in the world, to show God's love to people in the world? Because this is the day we've gotten. This is the chance we have, huh?
Yeah, Pastor Steve, I think of it kind of like this. When there's bad stuff happening in the world, instead of asking, who must God be punishing? I think, how could I be a part of God helping them to be better? When somebody is hurting from a disaster or an accident or a war or even a pandemic, instead of just jumping to, God must be mad at them, God must be zapping them, instead, I'm going to start with, God's always looking to heal and make things new and to show us love. That's what Jesus shows us, right? So if God's always at work somehow for good, for love, for healing what's broken, then when bad things happen, the question I ask is, how can I be a part of what good thing God is doing in the world? And if I can't see it yet, maybe I've got to be it. Maybe I've got to start. Maybe God's moving me to be the first person to do something good in the world when rotten things are happening around me. Because right now, this is the day I've got. This is the chance I've got. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do get what you mean, Al. And, maybe instead of spending so much of my time reading and seeing what other people think about who they should be mad at or blaming when bad things happen, maybe I can use today, not reading what other people think, but doing something good. So, yeah, if you're going to let me, could I be a part of helping make some of these buttons? I want to be I want to be a part of something good in the face of a rotten thing happening.
Well, great, Pastor Steve. I sure could use your help. I'm so glad you want to be a part of helping make things better instead of just reading what other people think about what the problem is. Yeah, I tell you what, I'll use the presser and you can use the cutter. We'll make some more buttons, all right?
Thanks, Al. I'll do just that. Okay, so I'll take the cutter and I know you really must need my help if you're letting me use something with a sharp edge on it. We're on our way. Thanks, Al.